everyone is safe in this COVID lockdown period. We have the webinar on two topics. The first one is impact of IBC, ease of doing, which will be handled by Mrs. Medha Shekhar from IBBI. To take you through the aspects of how IBC helps in economic growth, conversion of stress assets to performing one. So we'll talk about the World Bank survey and its importance on participating in the survey matters. Second session will be on relaxation of IBC threshold. Session will be handled by the CA, IP, and the advocate Ashish Mukhija. Currently, he is based in US, and thank you for agreeing to speak on this, even this time horizon. Participants, any queries you have, please type in the chat box. And in between the sessions, speakers will answer to your. Let us have an interactive webinar. And stay safe. Passing the mic to Mrs. Medha Segar from IBBI.
About the World Bank's ease of doing business. I hope I'm audible.
You're audible. Please talk on.
Please.
Can you mute everybody else, please, except for the speaker?
Lot of noise is coming.
Admin can mute everybody else. Okay.
All of the participants, please mute your mic so that the speaker is audible to everyone.
Yes. I think you can do it from your side to mute everyone.
Check on the muting.
It's a request to all the participants, because unless you do that, it wouldn't be a successful webinar. As admin, we can mute everyone, but
Should I proceed, Prashant?
Please,
yeah,
Mrs. Medha, you can proceed.
Sure. In a minute, it would be smooth. In a minute, it would be smooth.
Hello. Presentation first about the survey that the World Bank conducted, particularly focusing on the answers that should be given by participants to the ease of doing business questionnaire. And I'll also be taking you briefly through the questionnaire to show you what it looks like so that you can easily participate in the same. So I'll be starting with my presentation. Matter so much, especially in the context of resolving insolvency, as we know that resolving insolvency is one of the key parameters in this particular index, and it ensures freedom of exit. And most importantly, this ranking by the World Bank is tracked by international investors. And this recognition perception about resolving insolvency in a particular jurisdiction. And the ranking also reflects what the legal framework of a country is particularly, whether it's relevant to the stakeholders or not, and if it's ensuring freedom of exit. Look at India's performance. There has been a significant improvement, especially from the report of 2019 to 2020. The overall ranking has moved up by almost 56 places. To take the time taken to resolve insolvency has been noted by the World Bank. It has reduced it from 4.3 to 1.6 years. They have also shown that our recovery rate has improved significantly from 26.5 cents on the dollar to 71.6. Another important aspect that they have captured is the outcome of an insolvency proceeding in India, which they have recognized is resolution of the firm as a going concern. Why we have seen such significant improvement in our rankings is because the World Bank question is now recognizing changes that have been brought about by the code. India has done much better than its South Asian partner. Our ranking is much higher than theirs. Even if you look at OECD high-income countries, on certain aspects, we have definitely scored much better. So if you look at the recovery rate, our recovery rate is higher. The time is also less than the OECD high-income countries. So in a way, we are doing, on an average, better than the South Asian countries and the OECD high-income. This is a data taken from the Reserve Bank of India, and this is showing you the NPAs of scheduled commercial banks that have been recovered through different legislations. And as you can see, 42.5% of the amount that was recovered by SCBs came from the IBC. And this data is as on December 2019, and you can see that the realizable amount of FCs as a percentage of liquidation is 197.8%, and realizable value as percentage of their claims admitted is 43.15. That the World Bank adopts. So they basically look at two aspects. The first aspect is the recovery rate, which is a function of the time, cost, and the outcome of an insolvency proceeding. And the second aspect is the strength of the insolvency framework index. So there they have four items, and each item is scored, and then we arrive at the insolvency framework index strength. When we look at the recovery rate, here the World Bank is looking at three things: the time that is required to recover a debt, the cost that is incurred on recovering this debt, and the final outcome, whether the firm was sold as in piecemeal, whether its assets were sold in piecemeal, or it continued to operate as a going concern. And these three, when added up together, they give us the total recovery rate. This is the World Bank methodology. Now, the Doing Business Survey 2021, this survey is telling you how you're supposed to approach the questionnaire and fill it up. The first part of the questionnaire deals with the definitions. It's very important for all the participants to go through these definitions because they have a different understanding of terms. So, for example, interim finance is referred to as post-commencement credit. Reorganization is nothing but resolution. The organization plan is a resolution plan. So before you start answering this questionnaire, it's important to understand these definitions. Part of the questionnaire, it deals with reforms and statistics, particularly to our jurisdiction. So they have given us a time frame that is between May 2nd, 2019 till now. What are the major developments in the legal framework and even the other ancillary legislations that have made it easier to resolve insolvency in the country? Listed a few legislations which you can also note down in your answers. And these legislations and details are available on the IBPI website. So if you go through our notifications and our newsletter in particular, all these details are available and you can easily understand, pick them up and incorporate them in your answers. So we are here referring to the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Amendment Act of 2019 and also the latest one, 2020, for the central government rules that notified FSPs other than banks and provided a framework of the same. You can also refer to the Reserve Bank of India Prudential Framework for Resolution of Stressed Assets, under which the RBI can direct banks to
मना कर
start.
रहे हैं ऐसे हशब नहीं कर रहे वो मन में बात करनी वो करा नहीं आज नहीं हो सकती कल फिक्स इट फॉर
against specific people. Next question is
फ्री नहीं होगा या कुछ होगा उसका इशू कुछ
going to come sometime before May 1, 2020. So here, while referring to the amendments that we have already answered in the previous question,
अभी
we
तो
can
मीटिंग फिक्स नहीं करी थी ना 4 बजे मीटिंग किसने करी है
just planning to insolvency cross
अभी से 1:30 तो अभी अभी ज्यादा नहीं टाइम है तो अभी ये बात होगी चलेगी
entities that have been constituted by the government for the same. They can be accessed through the IBBI website. Now, this question is in particular to the practitioners, the insolvency professionals in particular, in terms of how many insolvency cases have you handled till December 31, 2019. And here you can give an accurate figure as to how many cases you have successfully handled as an IRP, IP, even as a liquidator. The next question is about insolvency cases being handled in the entire jurisdiction. Again, this data is easily available on the IBBI website, and you can quote the latest data in this particular question. The next question is about what proportion of distressed business filings continued to operate as a going concern upon completion of CIRP in 2019. So here we've given a broad picture of how cases have been dealt with under the IBC. So we are talking about 15,000 applications being filed before the AA, and almost 90% of them were disposed of. So 12,000 were settled before admission. We have 135 withdrawn under Section 12A, 190 dissolved, 780 closed by liquidation. Capture in your answer the fact that a large number of these cases that are being resolved involve a huge amount of assets. Talking about rescuing assets worth crore, and companies that were referred to liquidation had assets worth 0.2 lakh crore. So we are saying that assets rescued under the IBC is almost 4 times compared to those that were referred for liquidation. And you can also talk about the fact that a large number of these cases were rescued or that went into liquidation. They were in fact under BIFR, or they were defunct. So the picture that we are trying to capture is that the IBC has been very much successful in resolving assets worth lakhs of crores. And this is very important. It talks about a case study specifically, and in this we're talking about the questions that will follow in this part will be referring to this case study alone. So here they've given us the example of a small limited liability company, which is a hotel, and it is operating in Delhi. And they have given us the valuation of the hotel, which is 1.39 crore. And this particular hotel has taken a loan from a bank, which was secured by this hotel property. They also told us that the outstanding credit was almost 74% of the hotel's outstanding credit. And the questions that will follow now will be based on this particular case. So here they ask us a question about what in-court procedure is most likely applicable to this particular hotel. So here we'll the answer option that we choose. So you'll have multiple options. So the answer option that we'll choose will be reorganization, which is resolution. And next to each option that you choose, there is also a comment box. I'll be taking you through the questionnaire later on, and I'll show you where the comment section is. And there you can write a little description of the IBC and why you think that how do you think resolution will be possible of this particular hotel. The next question is which court will be involved, which will be NCLT. Now, based on the procedure that you've selected, which is resolution, you have to talk about how will the hotel be able to continue its operations. So here we'll specifically refer to Section 14 of the code. We'll talk about how it prohibits suspension of supply of essential goods and services to the CD. And we can also refer to the latest Amendment Act of 2020, where we're talking about prohibiting suspension of licenses, rights, quotas that have been given by the state, and those services which are considered critical to protect the CD. So it's important to capture the entire gamut of reforms that have been introduced for allowing the CD to continue as a going concern during CIRP. Insolvency resolution process take. Here again, we refer to the data which is available on the IBBI website, and you can quote all references from the IBBI website. So here we're talking about the average time taken for resolution. The 190 CIRP resolutions was approximately 364 days. If you exclude the time that has been excluded by the AA, and for liquidation cases, it was approximately 308 days. So while the World Bank has recognized that our time has significantly reduced from 4.3 to 1.6 years, this was given in the report. By quoting these figures of 364 days, 308 days, we can show that the time is still less than 1.6 years as recorded by the World Bank. Now, how much will the entire process cost? The World Bank has been quoting a percentage figure of 9% for quite some years now. And we want to showcase to them that because of the IBC, the costs have significantly reduced. And there are multiple reasons for it. Of course, one of the most important reasons being the time involved in resolution has significantly reduced. And that, of course, reduces your overall cost of engaging professionals and IPs and appearing in courts, and of course, the NCLTs have multiple benches, and all activities with respect to insolvency resolution have all been culminated into one proceeding and one process. And that significantly reduces cost of the process. So here you can even quote your personal experience in the cases that you have handled and what has been the total cost. And we can definitely show that the cost is less than 9%, as has been repeatedly shown by the World Bank. And here we'll refer, the next question is about laws and supporting regulations. Here you'll refer to the Act and the regulations that are applicable in this particular case. Here we can also see that because this hotel is a very small hotel, it will most probably undergo fast track CIRP. The next part of the questionnaire, this mainly deals with the Strength of Insolvency Framework Index. And this comprises of 4 aspects. The first is commencement of the proceedings itself. The second aspect is about how you manage the debtor's assets. The third is about how you resolve the insolvent CD. And finally, how much are the creditors involved? And a combination, the score that we get on all the 4 is the total strength of the insolvency framework. Now, in this part, we specifically refer to the legal framework involved. Now the case study is over. The questions over here in this section are in reference to the legal framework in general. So if you refer to the first question, what procedures are available to a debtor when commencing insolvency? Now this question carries a score of 1, and last year we scored 0.5 on this. And here the answer option that we'll be choosing is that the debtor can file for both liquidation and reorganization. And the argument that we give here is that, of course, at the first instance, when CIRP is initiated, the objective of the code is resolution. And only if the attempt of resolution fails do we proceed for liquidation. So it's important to capture the fact that while resolution is, of course, the first option, if it fails and it is the COC's wisdom, the company goes for liquidation. And you can also refer to the voluntary liquidation proceedings that are available under the code. So that is why we choose the first option, that is, the debtor can file for both liquidation and reorganization. In the next question, again, they ask us about if the framework allows a creditor to file for initiating insolvency. Again, we scored 0.5 on this last year, and we give the same arguments as we gave in the previous question, that at the first instance, there's resolution. If that fails, we go for liquidation. And it's also important to mention the amendment of August 2019, where we say that the COC can actually liquidate the CD at any time during CIRP, even before the preparation of the IM. What basis for commencement of insolvency proceedings? The answer over here is very straightforward. It is the general ability to pay your debt or default, in other words, and we scored full marks on this last year. The next question, the next section is about management of the debtor's assets. And here the question is, does the insolvency framework allow continuation of essential goods and services to the debtor? Now, we have scored 0 on this last year, although there is a specific provision in the code for supply of essential goods and services. So it is very important to quote the particular section of the code when you're answering this question. And you can also refer to the Amendment Act of 2020. Here I've written Amendment Ordinance. This has, of course, become an act now. And you can specifically talk about its provisions to strengthen your answer. The next question is, does the insolvency framework allow the rejection by the debtor of overly burdensome contracts? And here we scored 1, we scored full marks. And here we'll particularly refer to section 43, section 50, referring to your undervalued preferential fraudulent transactions. And you can also refer to regulation 10(1)D of the liquidation regulations and strengthen your answer further. The next question is also pertaining to avoidance of preferential or undervalued transactions. And again, we scored 1 in this section, and we'll refer to section 43, 45, 44 of the IBC. Now, the next question is about, does the insolvency framework provide for possibility of obtaining credit after commencement of insolvency proceedings? Again, we scored full marks on this last year, and we'll quote the particular section of the code relating to interim finance. And it's important to mention that the code actually incentivizes interim finance. Does the insolvency framework assign priority to post-commencement credit? In this, we scored only 0.5. Here it is important to mention that post-commencement credit, of course, it constitutes a part of the insolvency resolution process cost, and they have to be repaid in priority to all other debts. But it's also important to highlight the fact that the decision to raise this interim finance, it's taken by the COC, and the priority that it gets over other debts is also with the consent of the creditors, including the secured creditors. So we have to include in our answer the fact that while interim finance is, of course, getting a priority in repayment, it is in no way deprioritizing the secured creditors. So it's very important to capture this aspect in your answer to improve the score to 1. Which creditors vote on the proposed reorganization plan? We have scored 0 on this last year. And here we will talk about the specific provisions of the code wherein the COC comprising of FCs votes on the approval of the resolution plan. And it's important to highlight the fact that while only FCs are voting on the approval of the plan, the objective of the code is balancing the interest of all the stakeholders. And here we can mention a very interesting statistic that till now, of all the CIRPs that have been initiated, 9.6% of these were initiated by operational creditors. So even though OCs, they are constituting a very small part of the total claims, and they have no voting right in the COC, they still have faith in the IBC, and they are going ahead and filing applications. So while they do not vote, they are still initiating CIRP. So it's very important to capture this statistic in your answer. Then, does the insolvency framework require the following provisions? These are not very much applicable in our case. So here we can answer through the comment section. We can make a few comments on the questions that have been asked. Does the insolvency framework require that dissenting creditors in reorganization receive at least as much they would obtain in a liquidation? Here we scored a 0. last year, and it's very important to mention here that in the amendment that happened in August 2019, those FCs who do not vote in favor of a resolution plan, they shall be paid an amount which is not less than the amount payable to them under liquidation. So we have a provision for this. Does the framework require approval by the creditors for selection or appointment of the insolvency representative? Again, we, for some reason, scored a 0 on this question last year. And here we'll specifically refer to section 22 of the code, which provides that COC in its very first meeting will resolve to appoint the IRP as RP. And here, the World Bank feels that the role of the adjudicating authority in the appointment of an insolvency representative should be minimal. The idea that they have is that the adjudicating authority under the Indian jurisdiction is playing a more pivotal role in the appointment of the IRP, whereas the World Bank feels that it is the creditors who should ultimately decide the appointment. And therefore, here we will mention particularly that the role of the adjudicating authority is limited only to examine the criteria of fit and proper person of the IRP. And that the A is basically playing the role it's basically a pass-through mechanism in the appointment of the IP. And the COC holds the main power when it comes to appointment of the IP. Then does the insolvency framework require approval by the creditors for sale of substantial assets? And here we scored 0 again last year. And here we'll say that the sale of any substantial assets, it requires the approval of the COC by a vote of not less than 66%. And we'll also mention that our framework is actually not a sale model. We are trying to resolve a CD in distress. And sale of assets, if required, it's permitted only to a limited extent. So we'll refer specifically to regulation 29 of the CIRP regulation. Does the insolvency framework provide that an individual creditor has the right to request information from the IP at any time about the CD? Here we scored full marks, and we'll, in your answer, you'll refer to the specific regulations and section 29 of the IBC as well. And the last question is, does the framework provide that an individual creditor has the right to object to the decision of accepting or rejecting its own claims and claims of other creditors? Here we scored a 0 last year, but here we'll mention that under section 42, it explicitly provides that a creditor can appeal to the A against any decision of the IP, either accepting or rejecting, in reference to accepting or rejecting of claims. So also under section section 65 of the IBC, the NCLT has jurisdiction to entertain or dispose of any claims that that are made by or against the CD. So we should be scoring a 1 on this question and not 0 like last year. So in the end, here is the how to participate in this survey. So here I've mentioned the link through which you can directly get access to the questionnaire. The World Bank has uploaded it for limited time period, so you are required to fill the questionnaire by 17th April. So there are two options. Either you can click on this link and you can fill the questionnaire online, or you can download the form, which is also available on the same link, and you can email it to the email ID that is mentioned here. So to the questionnaire, I'll just quickly show you what the questionnaire looks like, so that we all have clarity. There's a lot of.
Please, you can start with the question, Mrs. Mehta.
This is what the questionnaire looks like. Once you download it, they'll ask you for your primary information, which you can fill up. Then, as I said, part 1 of the questionnaire giving definitions. Second part referring to reforms in statistics. And third part is with your case study. Now, in this questionnaire, they give you the answer which was given last year and the answer that you have to give this year. So last year's answer will give you an idea how inaccurate or accurately the framework was captured in the questionnaire. So for every question, you have the options here. You click on the option, whichever is the right answer, you select that. Here is the comment section where you can type your comments. So here is where you give detailed answers. So this is basically what the questionnaire looks like. And yeah, that's about it. So thank you so much, Prashant. I'm done with this session and I'm open to any questions. Is someone? So I'll be answering this question. Is someone trying to speak to World Bank to actually clarify their doubts and sensitize them on what the reality is? So the World Bank, they have their own sample. So they ask these questions to specific stakeholders that they have identified. And apart from that, they upload this questionnaire on their website. So this questionnaire is open to all practitioners, whether IPs, RVs, can answer this questionnaire, and this is how they can be sensitized about what the reality is there on the ground. And there's another question regarding some odd 3 lakh crores of FC claims admitted. Yes, this is as per the database maintained by IBBI, and this data is very much available on our website. So thank you, Prashant. I'll be. This is all for the ease of doing business presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. on the presentation on the ease of doing business, explain the matters of the questionnaires of the survey and taking through the complete session on the thing. So let us move to the next session with Advocate Ashish Makhija. Sir is talking on the relaxation of IBC threshold, the latest threshold limit, the limit being increased from 1 lakh to 1 crore. So sir will be taking the session on the same. Over to Mr. Ashish Makhija.
Hello, Makhija sir, your voice was not audible so far. Can you please start again?
Okay, it's audible.
Yeah, it's now clear, quite clear, sir.
Okay. Friends, very good evening to each one of you. Of course, everyone is sitting at home because of the lockdown, and let's hope for the best that we get over this pandemic very soon by following the guidelines of the government. This is the best time to obtain a new skill or maybe to learn. And ICSI, particularly the IIP, is doing a great job while organizing these kind of seminars, that while sitting at home, we can utilize our time to enhance our learning. Friends, recently what we have seen on 24th March 2020, there was a government notification SO number 1205E, whereby in section 4, there is a limit of the default, the minimum amount of default. Now, that was earlier rupees 1 lakh to begin the CIRP process. Now, by issuing a notification, which the government is empowered to do so, that limit has been increased for the minimum amount of default from rupees 1 lakh to 1 crore of rupees. Now, this is something because that is the maximum amount which was allowed. The government has to do that. So the minimum amount of default for the purposes of part 2 has been increased to 1 crore of rupees. Now, we have got a lot of questions on our mind that how it is going to impact the whole CIRP process. There are a lot of repercussions which are involved. I am going to cover a few of them. And if I'm not able to answer during my session, maybe we'll definitely take some questions and answers on that. Friends, before I proceed, there are a lot of background noises. So may I request everyone to please mute their mics because otherwise other people will not be able to hear. Okay, thank you so much. Now, friends, this you see, by the press statement by the finance minister also that we are increasing the default limit for insolvency and bankruptcy code from 1 lakh to 1 crore. And then there is another further statement. If the situation continues beyond April, the government will protect companies from being forced into insolvency by suspending IBC Section 7, 9, and 10 for 6 months. So the purpose of people do ask us that what is the purpose or intent behind increasing the default limit from 1 lakh to 1 crore rupees? I think the reason is this situation, the prevalent situation which is there. The companies are definitely not able to function. They are in any case closed. The creditors' monies are going up. So more and more people, supposing this lockdown is over, then more and more people who are not paid, they may take companies to the NCLT for CIRP process. So just to avoid that, the government has actually thought it to bring it from 1 lakh to 1 crore rupees. Well, looking at this statement, we feel that this is a temporary measure. We do not know whether this is going to be for all times to come. That is, of course, we'll have to see as far as the situation is concerned. But the government is much more serious than this in the sense that if the situation does not improve in April, the minister's statement, the honorable finance minister's statement clearly says that maybe they may suspend IBC provisions 7, 9, and 10, which are for initiation of the CIRP process for 6 months. So practically for this whole year, it could be possible. Right now, it is not the situation. So now, friends, let us understand the aspect of what is the impact of 1 lakh to 1 crore. Now, if we look at the provision, let me also read the notification which has been issued for your benefit. In fact, I'll be able to share that on my screen also. I've got it. Let me see if I can share that. Okay, I think I'll be able to share it now. Yes, okay. I believe my friends can see that document now. Now, this notification, my dear friends, is of 24th March 2020. It says, in exercise of the powers conferred by proviso to Section 4 of IBC, central government hereby specifies 1 crore rupees as the minimum amount of default for the purposes of said section. So this was what was mentioned by in the notification, friends. Now, if we read this, the provision is prospective and not retrospective. Now, this has a major impact. I think a lot of questions would be there. What happens to the application already filed? What happens if I have already issued a demand notice? So there are many questions which I'm definitely going to answer this. But first of all, let us understand that this provision is prospective and not retrospective, which clearly means that it will not be applicable to the applications which are already filed or pending before the NCLT. This is one of the important aspects because my friends will recall that Supreme Court and number of judgments, including Zile Singh judgment of 7th October 2004, it clearly said that it is a cardinal principle of construction that every statute is prima facie prospective unless it is expressly or by necessary implication made to have a retrospective operation. If we look at the notification, it does not say so that it will operate retrospectively. Of course, even in that proviso, the government does not have power to enforce it from a back date. So therefore, let us be conclusive on this, that this is going to be prospective and this is not retrospective. Now, let us consider the legal impact and we'll also consider the practical impacts also. When I say it is prospective and not retrospective, that means it will affect the filings on or after 24th March 2020. So it is not going to affect for the filings which have already been done on or prior to 24th March 2020. Now let us look at, let us divide this discussion into various parts. Number one, cases where CIRP is going on. Obviously, there is no impact because the CIRP is already going on. The change in the limit does not impact them. Number two, let us understand the second type of the cases. Cases where applications under section 7, 9 or 10 have been filed and are pending for adjudication. It is likely that many of the applications you would have filed or many applications are pending before various benches of NCLT where the adjudication is yet to be done on these three applications, whether it is under section 7, 9 or 10, because the limit applies to all these three. Now, according to me, when I say that this provision is prospective and not retrospective, so therefore any application which is pending adjudication, this provision will have no effect on the applications filed prior to 24th March 2020. So I'm very clear in my mind when I say this, because of the simple reason that if you look at this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Amendment Act of 2020, of course, that came as an ordinance earlier. Now it has become an act where the limit for the home buyers was also increased. That minimum 100 number of members or 1/10 of the total number of members in that particular real estate project. And in that, there was a specific proviso. One proviso has been added where it clearly says that which affects the pending applications also. And I'll read that for you so that we understand the difference. It said, I'm reading the proviso which has been added before explanation under section 7 by the Amendment Act of 2020. It says, provided also that where an application for initiating CIRP process against a corporate debtor has been filed by a financial creditor referred to in first and second proviso, which deals with the increase in number of the home buyers and has not been admitted by the adjudicating authority before the commencement of IBC Act, Amendment Act of 2020, such application shall be modified to comply with the requirement of the first and second proviso within 30 days of the commencement of the said act, failing which the application shall be deemed to be withdrawn before its admission. So, my dear friends, the government very clearly inserted a proviso stating that those applications will also have to comply with the requirement of more than 100 members or whatever the requirements are there. And if they do not do, then those applications shall be deemed to have been withdrawn if they do not do it within 30 days. So with this specific provision being inserted, it is clear that this provision is also kind of a half retrospective in nature, that it also applies to the applications which are pending. But I'm drawing a distinction, my dear friends. That is in IBC Amendment Act of 2020, where there is a specific provision. Here in the notification which has been issued, increasing the limit from 1 lakh to 1 crore rupees, there is no such kind of a clause. So therefore, we can safely presume and we can safely interpret that this provision is going to be prospective and not retrospective, in the sense that it is not going to affect even the applications which have been filed prior to 24th March 2020 and are pending adjudication. So this is the second stage, right? Now let us come to the third stage, where the matters are going to be serious, in the sense that people are really wanting to know what will happen to my case where I have not filed an application. Now let us look at the circumstances. Cases. Let us assume a case under section 9 where you or your client has already sent a demand notice. 10-year period may have expired or might not have expired, right? Supposing you have issued a notice on, say, 10th March, you are supposed to give 10 days notice to the corporate debtor. So on 20th March, the period expired, but you did not file the application before 24th March because still it was within the limitation period, and you could have filed prior to the expiry of the limitation period, because there is a long limitation period, because it continues from the date of default and it goes up to 3 years in terms of Article 137 of the Limitation Act. The second case could be that supposing you issued a notice on 15th of March And even your 10 days period did not expire prior to 24th March. Your period expired on 25th March because there is a 10 days waiting period. Of course, in the section 7, there is no demand notices to be sent, but yes, the limitation period is there. So the company, the corporate owes you as a financial creditor more than 1 lakh rupees, and you were wanting to start the proceedings of the CIRP, you wanted to file the application, but since it was within limitation period, so you did not file. So those could be circumstances which was there. Now let us also understand in another manner. On 15th March 2020, now I'm coming on a very, very specific matter of 15th March of 2020. There was a notice which was published by National Company Law Tribunal, Principal Bench, NCLT. And I will read it for you because that is also very important. In view of advisory issued by central government considering the seriousness of the pandemic novel coronavirus, it is hereby directed that all NCLT benches may take up matters which require urgent hearings on request made by the concerned parties. The rest of the matters from 16/3/2020 to 27th March, from 16th March to 27th March, keep giving adjournments. Third, the councils are advised to restrict the presence of the extent required so that we all can contribute our efforts not to allow the spread of this pandemic. And of course, then there are minor other things. To take adjournments, parties or council presence is not required. Do remember, avoid coming for this purpose. And this issues with the approval of the Honorable Acting President, NCLT. It is signed by the registrar. So this was a notice which was, issued by NCLTs, clearly saying that matters will not be heard, and all the benches are required to give adjournments. Only urgent matters could be mentioned. But in my experience, even if matters were mentioned on, say, 16th March or later, the principal bench still refused to hear the matters, saying that this pandemic is much serious, so therefore the health is more important than the benches or the matters which are there. So this is one part of it. This does not talk about the closure of the filing counters, because filing was continuing. The only thing was that the benches were directed to give adjournments and not to hold the hearings. Then on 19th March, now this is a very important notice. Let me see if I can share this with all of you, because it is there on the website also. So if I can share, yes, it is there. Let me share this. Yes, this is the notice. Now my friends can see this. This is the notice which is issued by NCLT, and this is dated 19th March 2020. It says that it is observed that all NCLT benches have become crowded for filing counters which may lead to community transmission of novel coronavirus. Therefore, it is decided to close the filing counters. Now, my dear friend, this is extremely important. It says close the filing counters. So filing counters remained closed from 19th March to 24th March. Even if I was willing to file during this period, because we also had many cases which were supposed to file, where notice was issued or on behalf of the financial creditor, but we could not do so because there were filing counters which were closed. Now, number 2, it says, in case of limitation issue, matters may be filed online at Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Amravati, and Jaipur, and hard copy may be handed over when the filing counters are opened. Till such time, parties are directed not to make any filing except matters likely to be hit by limitation. So it is very clearly says that if your case is being hit by limitation, it's obviously 3 years from the period of default or the due amount as per the Limitation Act. So supposing your limitation was expiring on say 20th of March. So they said that you can file it online at these places, Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Amravati, and Jaipur, and then you may hand over the hard copy as and when the filing counters reopen. Third, with regard to other benches on application without annexure as to the limitation issue may be filed through email of the respective registrar of bench. Now, other benches did not have the facility of online filing, so they advised the applicants that you can email it to the registrar concerned without annexure, so to overcome the limitation issue. Hence, filing counters of all NCLT benches shall remain closed till 27th March 2020. So from 19th March till 27th March, they directed that they will be closed. And this was issued with the approval of the Honorable President, Acting President, NCLT. Now, friends, we have seen two aspects here. One is definitely in respect of the things that this is prospective and not retrospective. Now, let us take a case that I was willing to, let us try to analyze this. That if I was willing to file it, my limitation was not expiring. Therefore, I was directed that please do not file, because from 15th March to 19th March, that is the notice. It says only those cases should be filed where limitation. But if the limitation is not the issue, I was said that please do not come and do not file it. Do not overcrowd the filing counters. But from 19th March itself, the filing counters were closed. So even if I wanted to file, whether limitation or no limitation, I could not do so because the filing counters were closed. Then in the meantime, on 24th March, a notification comes which increases the limit. It actually affects all those cases which were not filed. So this is one of the aspects which is there. So now we have to consider in this part that what happens to such cases, because I can always obviously tell the court, like I can move as and when the filing counters open, I can file a case based on 1 lakh limit, I'm just assuming right now. I'm not saying that you should do this. Let us assume what the NCLT is going to say, that look, my dear friend, the limit has increased to 1 crore rupees. Sorry, your application is not admitted. So my plea as a counsel would be that, look, my lords, the situation is like this. I was willing to file, but from 19th March, you closed down the filing counters. And by that time, they could be reopened, because still now they were not reopened. And of course, there is a lockdown of India after that also. So on 24th March, you increase the limit. So why should I suffer on that account? Because I was willing to do it. So this is one of the aspects which need to be seen. Now, here let us look at what are the legal options which are available to us, or other legislative act options which are available to us. The first option, my dear friends, is available to, we'll discuss force majeure also. Somebody is writing force majeure. We'll discuss that also. Now, first option is, friends, can I request everyone to please mute your microphones? Yes, thank you. The central government can issue a removal of difficulty order. If you read section 242 of IBC, this is an interesting aspect which is there, which I'm raising, an option. The power to remove difficulties lies with the central government. I'll just read it for you. If any difficulty arises in giving effect to the provisions of this code, the central government may, by order published in the official gazette, make such provisions not inconsistent with the provisions of this code as may appear to be necessary for removing the difficulty, provided that no order shall be made under this section after the expiry of 5 years from the commencement of the code. So till now, my dear friends, 5 years have not expired from the commencement of the code. Central government still has got powers to issue removal of difficulty orders. And this is a kind of a difficulty which has come in the way, whether you call it as a force majeure or whatever. It's obviously a forced thing, because it is beyond the control of anyone. It is an act of a god, or maybe act of the nature, what we can call it. So this is one of the options which is available to this. Yes, obviously the provision says not inconsistent with the code, but if you allow applications on the basis of 1 lakh rupees for some time, I'm not saying that it will be open for all times, but to cover up those cases which were ripe. Like I have already issued a legal demand notice, but I could not file because the filing counters were cleared. So there was a difficulty. And even within 1 lakh, it is also it is not inconsistent with IBC. So therefore, government is only overcoming the difficulty. I do not think that it is inconsistent with the IBC, because even that limit was 1 lakh of rupees, right, which has been increased to 1 crore of rupees. So this is one of the options, we are just discussing the options. That is one part. Second is that supposing central government does not issue, then what are the options which are left to me? What I can do is when I move an application, when the filing counters open, when I move an application, so what I suggest this also, that if you have a case which is ripe, use this time while you are sitting at home or working from home, prepare that application, and the moment the filing counters open, then immediately you should file that. Along with an application, of course, invoking the powers of the NCLT under Rule 11 of their inherent powers, and also under Section 60 subsection 5 of IBC, read with 60 subsection 5, that my lords may also look at this aspect, that I was ready and willing to file. Your filing counters did not permit, were not open. And in the meantime, the limit was increased. So therefore, please treat the earlier limit for my purposes. Now, what is going to happen? Let us discuss the consequences. This is another option which is possible. Now, which is also possible, that we are trying to invoke the you can say the inherent powers of NCLT. Now, if you ask me legally, I would say that I have my doubts insofar as NCLTs, can they relax the limit from 1 crore to 1 lakh rupees to such cases because of the closure of the filing counters also. The inherent powers of the court, the Supreme Court has actually defined the limits, that how these powers can be used, right? This is extremely important for us to understand, that under what circumstances the powers can be invoked. In Darshan Singh's case, which is State of Punjab versus Darshan case, Supreme Court, again 2004 case, 2004, if somebody is interested in the citation, 2004, 1 SCC 328. Now, it actually dealt with inherent powers of the civil courts under Section 152 of the CPC, which is quite similar to Rule 11 of NCLT rules. And in the Supreme Court clearly said that the section cannot be invoked for claiming a substantive relief which was not granted under the decree, or as a pretext to get the order which has attained finality reviewed. That means substantive relief cannot be claimed. Now here, asking the NCLT to consider my application on an older limit of 1 lakh rupees and not 1 crore rupees, according to me, it is asking for a substantive provision, asking for a relaxation in a substantive provision, which in my opinion, NCLTs will not have the powers to do that. So most likely, even if I move an application like this, it is likely to be rejected. Now, what is the second option, which is third option, which is available to me? Supposing this application gets rejected, obviously, I have an option to go to NCLAT. And again, in NCLAT, I need to, invoke their inherent power. Again, there has to be an inherent power, because NCLAT rules also permit NCLAT to have the inherent powers. Now, the question is whether they will also be able to accept and use the inherent powers. Well, my dear friends, they have already done so in that case. Friends, Darshan Singh's case, I can again give you a citation. This is 2004 1 SCC Supreme Court cases 328. Okay. So now the other aspect is whether NCLAT will also utilize its power, inherent power, to allow the relief to the people. Friends, again, the same position, Darshan Singh's judgment, applies squarely also to NCLAT, because it is also a tribunal, though of course it is an appellate tribunal. But looking at the historical orders, history of the orders which has been passed, and recent order, now I am drawing your attention to the recent order, my dear friends, which has been passed by NCLAT, and most of you would be aware. But let me share with you that they have passed an order not on any application or not on any appeal, but suo moto. This order has been passed on 30th March 2020, right? Just 2 days back or 3 days back. It is suo moto company appeal number 1 of 2020. And it reads as under. So let me read it for your benefit so that we all understand how this power has been used. Upon request for urgent listing of cases having been made telephonically to the registrar of this appellate tribunal from various persons who are unable to physically file the same on account of complete lockdown declared by the government with effect from 25th March, we take suo motu cognizance of unprecedented situation arising out of the spread of coronavirus declared as pandemic. Having regard to the hardships being faced by the various stakeholders, as also the legal fraternity, which go beyond filing of appeals cases, which has already been taken care of by the Honorable Apex Court by extending the period of limitation with effect from 15th March 2020 till further orders in terms of order dated 23rd March 2020 in suo motu writ petition civil number 3 of 2020, in as much as certain steps required to be taken by various authorities under IBC or to comply with various provisions and to adhere the prescribed timelines for taking the resolution process to a logical conclusion in order to obviate and mitigate these such hardships. This tribunal, in exercise of powers, now look at this, in exercise of the powers conferred under Rule 11 of NCLAT rules, read with the decision of the appellate tribunal rendered in Quinn Logistics versus Max Softech Private Limited, which was decided on 8th May 2018. I think everyone is aware about Quinn Logistics judgment. We do order hereby as follows. So no one filed this appeal, but suo motu, this matter was taken up and this order was passed. Let us read what is the order. This was only a preamble. That the period of the lockdown ordered by the central government and the state government, including the period as may be extended either in whole or part of the country where the registered office of the corporate debtor may be located, shall be excluded for the purpose of counting of the period for resolution process under section 12 of the IBC in all cases where CIRP has been initiated and pending before any bench of NCLT or an appeal before the appellate tribunal. So, my dear friends, of course, it only relates to extension of time, exclusion of time under section 12. Quinn Logistics actually dealt with the exclusion of time because in CIRP, we talk about 180 days plus extension of 90 days. So no extension can be granted beyond this. But then Quinn Logistics judgment allowed NCLT benches to exclude. The exclusion was another term which was coined beyond extension. That certain period could be excluded, like if the time is wasted in litigation or even the IRP is not appointed in time or RP is not appointed in time or even the directors are not cooperating, the benches were allowing exclusion beyond extension also. So looking at that, section 12 extension has been automatically allowed to all the pending CIRP cases for the period of the lockdown from 25th March. This order is only in respect of section 12. I'm not saying that this also applies to the application not filed, but what I'm trying to show from this is that suo motu, if NCLAT can exercise powers to exclude the period of under section 12, so therefore, if I make an application to NCLAT asking to use its powers under Rule 11, even to exclude the period from 19th March when the filing counters were closed till the lockdown is over. Now that, of course, the time period is extended. So maybe it is a possibility that NCLAT may use their powers and may allow people to file such petitions. So this is one of the options which is possible. Nobody is sure that what is going to happen, but this is one of the options which can be tried. Now, number two, now the next part is, supposing NCLAT also does not do that. Let's look at this situation. NCLAT does not do that. Now, what happens? Well, my dear friends, we are left with the option to go to the Supreme Court. And in Supreme Court, you can file a civil appeal from the order of the NCLAT, or you can straight away go under Article 32, saying that, look, my lords, this is the problem which is there. And I'm sure somebody is going to file a petition, writ petition under Article 32 of the Constitution. And in that, what we can request to Supreme Court, that please use your powers given to you under Article 142 of the Constitution. My friends will recall that Article 142 of the Constitution gives the Honorable Supreme Court of India all powers to pass any order for doing the complete justice. You will recall that Article 142 has been invoked a number of times in IBC also, right? In the initial stages, when there was no provision relating to withdrawal of application after admission, Honorable Supreme Court used Article 142. I call it as Brahmastra, and this Brahmastra was used to allow the withdrawal of applications after admission by saying that NCLT, NCLATs do not have power. Later on, of course, Section 12A was brought in, and then even Swiss Ribbons judgment was also brought in, where in para 52, Honorable Justice Nariman has clearly said that NCLTs and NCLATs can invoke their powers under Rule 11 and can also allow withdrawal after admission, not even taking into account that 90% if the COC is not constituted. Of course, if COC is constituted, then most of the benches are following that. Let us have the approval of the 90% of the COC members. That is one part of it. But what I'm trying to say is that we can insist on invocation of this power. Article 142. So, my dear friends, let's recapitulate. Number one, those cases where the CIRP is already going on, no effect on them because the cases are already admitted and the CIRP is going on. Number two, the cases which have been filed but were pending for adjudication prior to 24th March when this limit was increased. According to me, since the provisions are prospective, so it will not have any effect on the cases already filed. Those cases have to be decided as per the law which was prevalent on the date when it was filed. It is very clear because there are a number of judgments. Law on the date of filing prevails, the limits on the date of filing prevail and not later on, unless they are specifically said so, as in the case of the home buyers, where in the case of the IBC Amendment Act, Section 7, where the proviso has been added, which I just read it out to you. The third situation, where was ready and willing to file. I had already issued a demand notice, but could not file because of the closure of the filing counters, number one. And on 24th March, the limit was increased, and thereafter, of course, there has been a lockdown. So therefore, the filing counters are closed even today. So I have suffered not because of my own negligence, but because of force majeure, but because of certain factors which were beyond my control. So why should I suffer? What are the options which are available? We just discussed. Number one, central government can definitely invoke its powers, use its power under Section 242 of IBC to remove the difficulty, this kind of a difficulty for some limited period. I'm not saying that let them do it for all times to come. Maybe they can say, okay, within next 10 days, whatever filing is to be done, supposing you were debarred from filing, or maybe from 19th to 24th March, say 5 days I was not allowed to file. So maybe they can give me 5 days also. Give us 5 days also. That's one option. Second, if the central government does not do so, then of course we can file the application. And this is what I'm suggesting, my dear friends. Do your part. Now, don't go to Supreme Court straight away. So what you need to do is keep your application ready, file it on the opening. Because if you don't file, then tomorrow the Supreme Court will also say, my dear friend, that's all right. If the filing counters were closed, now they are open. Supposing they open later on and you have still not filed it. So therefore, to make your case perfect, my dear friends, you must file it on the date of the opening, right? Immediately, maybe on the date of opening, maybe on the next day, but as early as possible. And move an application invoking the power of Rule 11 of NCLT rules, which is likely to be rejected because substantive reliefs can be granted under Rule 11. That is my legal and personal opinion, based on certain legal historical cases, precedents. The second option is, if NCLT rejects, obviously I can go to NCLAT, again asking NCLAT to give me relief on this ground, invoking their powers under Rule 11 of NCLAT rules, again inherent powers. And NCLAT has been little liberal in utilizing its power, so therefore, which they have done in suo motu also. In fact, if you ask me legally, the suo motu application or appeal, there is no power for the NCLAT to do so. But having done that, okay, it is binding on us, so we are doing this. So therefore, we can invoke the power of NCLAT. The chances are 50-50. Here they may do it, they may not do it. We are not sure. So the third option, supposing NCLAT rejects it, then I can straight away go to the Supreme Court and asking the Supreme Court to give me relief by using its powers under Article 142 of the Constitution. So my dear friends, these are the things which I could visualize that this is going to happen in these circumstances. I hope I am able to make myself clear on this particular aspect. We have some more time which is left with us. If you have certain questions, I can really take those questions right now, or maybe we can also discuss the IBC Amendment Act of 2020. So that is what we okay. There are questions which are there. What is meant by filing? What if the case number is not given by the registry? Well, my dear friends, as far as filing is concerned, the filing means you have to have a receipt.
एडवोकेट की आवाज थोड़ा लेट हो गया
Friends, can you just mute your microphones, please? Thank you. Yes. So as far as filing is concerned, Ketan, once you do a filing, you get a receipt, right? You get a stamped receipt. That is an evidence of filing, because there could be certain objections. The number is given only after removal of the objections, but you must show that you have filed it. Even if it is under objection, I think you have a good case at hand. Okay, I think because there are a lot of questions are there and they are moving pretty fast. So let me go back and see what best I can do. Will NCLT keeps this increase in threshold limit? Okay. The new question is typed. You see the old one goes very quickly. So let me see. As a factor to reject applications filed, will NCLT keeps this increase in threshold limit as a factor to reject applications already filed? Well, I told you that the applications which are already filed, my dear friends, because this provision is prospective and not retrospective, I do not think that they have the power to reject those applications, because the law on the date of filing applies. So therefore, the limit which was on the date of filing. So when you filed, if the limit was 1 lakh, it was a vested right in you. Please understand, on a legal aspect, the law created a vested right in you. So if that vested right was vested in me, nobody can take that right from me unless the legislature says so. If the legislature, supposing while issuing this notification, the government would have said, no, this will also be applicable for retrospective, then there is a huge problem, my dear friend. So they cannot do that. And in any case, they do not have power to do it retrospectively. So this is the purpose. Now, let us also look at one of the aspects. I think most of the questions are also hinging on this. What was the purpose of this? The purpose was, of course, to give the benefit to the MSME sectors, micro, small, medium enterprises. It would have given, because we do not want CIRPs of MSMEs just because of this particular issue, because now they are closed, they are under financial strain. They may not be able to pay their creditors. So everyone will be lining up the NCLT to start CIRP process of the MSMEs. So according to the government and according to us also, we do not want, 90% of the businesses to be before CIRP process, before the NCLT. So it is going to protect them. There is no doubt about it. But look at the second side of this, because every coin has two sides. Let us look at the second side. If I'm an MSME, now if I raise invoices on, I'll say, a large company, because if I'm making supplies, will my billings be more than 1 crore of rupees? The answer is, it is unlikely. Right? If I am a small industry, obviously my billings will range into 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, or maybe 30 lakhs. In some cases, of course, it can be more than 1 crore also. So now, with this limit coming into being, now these MSMEs will also not be able to invoke the provisions against the bigger corporate debtors. So it is actually a double-edged sword, which is actually, yes, it is protecting MSMEs from them to go into CRP process and into liquidation. But on the other hand, it is also impacting them that you are also not allowed to, start the CRP process against the bigger corporate debtors, which owe money to you and which might be less than 1 crore of rupees. And my dear friends, you will also recall that in case of operational creditors, now the limits cannot be combined or joint cannot be there. So this is a very, very extreme thing which is there. Yes, Mr. Amarnath is saying that NCLT, the online filing is still open. So what will happen in that case? Well, friends, online filing, yes, if you are ready, please do that as soon as possible. The filing is there. But the fact of the matter is that online filing is not the complete answer, because the papers have to be filed. The hard copies are required to be filed before the registries. So what I suggest is, yes, keep your application ready, file it as soon as possible, because you see, filing will again be incomplete without the notarization. So even in online, you have to file the notarized affidavits and other things. So how will you get the notary, because when you can't move out? But still, what I can suggest is, if the online filing is open, file it and then keep that hard copy ready, get it notarized, get it completed, and then file it on the opening of the day or maybe as soon as possible. Okay. Online for urgent matters without annexures. Well, that was only for that limited period, my dear friends, from 19th March, because that time the lockdown was not there. So every court was taking their own action. So that was only for limited period from 19th March to 27th March. But from 25th March, there has been a complete lockdown. So please understand the situation has completely changed. So I will say even that physical filing or the without annexures, of course, you can file it without annexures by email or through online, whatever is possible, right? That certainly one can do. Okay, why liquidation cases have not been covered in NCLAT order? Yes, I think that's a very good observation by Mr. Ashish Nanavati. I think yes, you are right. Even for the liquidation, this should have been done. In fact, you would also recall that there is another notification which has been issued by IBBI, which has amended the CIRP regulations, and they have inserted 40C, regulation number 40C. I'll read it for you. Special provision relating to timeline. Notwithstanding the timelines contained in these regulations, but subject to the provisions in the code, the period of lockdown imposed by the central government in the wake of COVID-19 outbreak shall not be counted for the purposes of the timeline for any activity that could not be completed due to such lockdown in relation to CIRP process. But my dear friends, let's understand what is the impact of this. 40C is a regulation. It cannot override a law. But it simply says that whatever timelines which are mentioned, specified in the regulations, right, which are, you can see the model timeline in regulation number 40A, that public announcement to be made within 5 days, claims to be invited within 14 days, all those time limits are there. It is actually talking about the timelines which are mentioned in regulation. And it very clearly says subject to the provisions of the code. So these regulations are subject to the provision of code. This does not effectively mean that section 12 gets impacted by this regulation. And for section 12, there is a suo motu order which has been passed by NCLAT on 30th of March. So read together with this, we can say that the period in any case will be excluded, which is there. So these are the things. But again, coming to that question that for liquidation, similar regulation has not been amended in liquidation also. So yes, you are right, my dear friend. When you say that this has not been included, we expect that not only for CIRP purposes, for liquidation processes also, let IBBI also amend the regulations and exclude the period from liquidation also. And similar situation should be there as far as the from the code also is concerned. So we expect NCLAT to maybe pass another suo motu order on this. So, but we can take a similar view, you see, in that case. Okay, what else do we have? Do we need a separate COC approval and approval of NCLT for exclusion of each case quoting section 40C? No, my dear friend, that is not required, because regulation 40C gives the empowers that this period is to be excluded from the period of the lockdown. So therefore, according to me, no COC approval is required. But yes, when you are holding a COC, maybe you can inform, because you have to keep them updated. You can simply say as an IRP or RP that, look, we have treated this period as excluded, and as a status report can also be filed. I mean, you can record in the minutes, and then, but no approval is required as such. You don't have to pass any resolution. And also, please keep the NCLT's benches, you see, updated by filing the status report, right? Okay. IPA should take up this issue with IBBI so that liquidation timelines also gets extended. Yes, Dr. Binoy is already on the line. Probably he has already noted it down. And definitely as an IPA, which is a leader which is basically, you can say, a mother figure or a father figure for the IPs. Yes, definitely they're going to take up with IBBI for the liquidation timelines. What else you can see? Friends, can you just mute your microphone? 10 days time frame has not lapsed by 20th March 2020. Yes, that's an interesting question. Anchal has asked. Anchal says that, look, supposing you issued a notice only on 18th March, obviously your time period is likely to be expired by 28th March. So now you can't take advantage of the fact that, look, I was ready to file before this. Well, Anchal, it's very difficult to say what will be the fate, but these cases may have to be treated little separately, right? Because it asks for the 10 days limit. I was well within the limitation period. You can always argue, because supposing your due, the amount became due on say 1st January 2020. So you have time limitation till 2023, 1st January. So you can always argue the point that, look, I was well within the limitation period. I issued the notice on 19th. The 10 days were going to expire on 29th. But in the meantime, you increase the limit. So this is a serious thing which happens. But let us also look at from another angle. Supposing you issued the legal notice, demand notice, say 6 months back, and you did not file. Then on whose negligence you have not filed it? Well, you can always argue that, look, my lords, I was well within the limitation period. Limitation was not expiring, so therefore I did not file. So that could also be the answer there, because when we say limitation, I'm allowed to file even up to the last date. So no court can deny me filing on the last date itself. So I think these are certain critical issues which have no clarity insofar as these things are concerned. But let us try to, if the government is proactive, particularly understands things, probably they may do it. Now, this is the limit is increase of the limit is, of course, not only helping SMEs, MSMEs, but it is also working in another way. It is going to reduce the workload before the NCLTs. Right now, because of the lockdown and even otherwise also, you might have seen that there has been quite a backlog with the NCLT benches. Even the applications which have been filed for approval of the resolution plans are pending for quite a long time. I mean, for maybe for 6 months or 9 months in some cases it is pending. We filed one of the application for approval of resolution plan in May 2019, and it is still pending. It is almost a year now. So therefore, we can easily say that they are quite burdened. So with the impact of 1 crore of rupees, yes, the government will, and in any case, with the lockdown, the backlog is going to increase, isn't it? The moment the filing counters are open, you can see the spurt in filings. Definitely, there are going to be a lot of applications, a lot of these things will be there. So this is also another way, probably the government is also trying to reduce the workload. But yes, the basic purpose was to give benefits to the corporate debtors. They never wanted the corporate debtors to come to, for the CRP process just because, you see, the lockdown is there, or because of the COVID pandemic which is there. Okay, let us look at what about the cases between 1 lakh and 1 crore? Will not OCs be affected more? Well, friends, look at this scenario. Now, some people do ask me a question that what is the remedy now available to OCs? Let me ask a question back to you. What was the remedy available to OC before IBC? Supposing IBC was not there, what was the remedy which was available to you? Obviously, the remedy was that you could go to the civil suit for recovery of money, because IBC, if you would have read the BLRC report and number of Supreme Court judgments and NCLAT judgments, they clearly say that this is not a recovery mechanism. Of course, on practical ground, it has become an arm twisting thing to recover monies also, because many of the cases have got settled because of this. But that, I only say it is in a transition phase, because it is bringing that financial discipline in the country. That was the only thing which is there. But the fact of the matter is the remedies are still available to the other OCs, that yes, they can approach the civil court. And if you are a home buyer, you can obviously approach in the RERA. You can go to the consumer forum also. So those options are still open. It is not that, you see, the CIRP was the only option which was left out. So this is one thing I think we need to really understand this way. Okay, in one of the cases, we were appointed as IP, and the COC decided our fees. Thereafter, the case was withdrawn under 12, and checks for our fees, okay, given but have not been cleared. Should we file against the CD or should we file an application? Friends, I don't know who has asked this question, because the name is coming as HP, like the computer name is coming. My dear friend, to answer this, probably I'll have to send a bill to you also. So please send me your address. Anyhow, I mean, I'll just answer it for your purposes. So if the fees of the IRP or RP is not paid, obviously you have to utilize section 60 subsection 5. So use that section and go to the court, go to the NCLT. I mean, the fees is very important actually. And I think we must bring that kind of discipline. And if you don't file, then the people will not realize that we are professionals. We are not working for free. So therefore, my dear friends, I advise you to take immediate steps to recover your fees by filing 60 subsection 5. Can demand notice sent by PCS? Yes, why not? My dear friend, you can send that. There is a Supreme Court judgment which clearly allows Shilpi Cables, Macquarie Bank Limited, which clearly says that advocate can send it. So PCS is also similar to advocate, so you can definitely do that. That should not be there. What about fees during lockout? Well, Snehal, I know that this question is going to come. You see, what happens during lockout? Well, are you paying? Are you or are you not paying your staff? So therefore, if the period is extended because of because of your fault, so definitely the fees you are entitled for that kind of a fees. Nobody can deny, because in any case you guys have been working from home, right? If the claims are to be verified, what a pendency is there. I think IPs are working from home also, isn't it? I've seen many IPs on web also. They are doing it. So most of the offices are working on online today, and people are working from home. So I believe that it is going to be there. Okay. Well, there are huge questions, my dear friends. They are going on the chat box. It is very difficult to try. I'm just taking the latest one. Will increase in limit negatively impact profession of IP? Yes, this is a very interesting and a good question, my dear friends. Well, my dear friends, IBBI was encouraging IPs, I mean the professionals like company secretaries, chartered accountants and others, or advocates also, to become IPs, which according to me is a very interesting profession and offers great opportunity. And many of you are already IPs. And of course, there are more than 3,000 IPs now, I believe, out of which maybe everyone is not practicing as an IP. But the fact of the matter is that if the increase in limit is done to 1 crore, it is not going to impact the cases of the financial creditors, because in most of the cases, if you see financial creditors, they owe more than 1 crore in most of the cases. Less than 1 crore, generally they don't come to CIRP. Probably they settle, or maybe they agree for the restructuring and all, where the monies are huge. So as far as the financial creditors are concerned, I do not see any impact. Yes, now if the CIRP is being started by operational creditors, yes, it is going to impact. Particularly, it is going to impact, what is going to be impacted is the real estate cases. If you see the history of the IPC cases, now the IBC cases, now many of the cases were real estate cases. If you look, all NCLT benches were flooded. Now it is going to definitely impact those things, because now you require 100 members, not even a 1 crore. You require even 100 members to join together. It is not on 1 crore itself. 1 crore is of course one limit, but the other limit is relating to the 100 members. So this is, my dear friends, is another aspect which is definitely going to impact. Yes, the cases are going to come down. The NCLTs will be less burdened. As far as the IP profession is concerned, well, I really don't know if the number of cases go down. Yes, maybe temporarily something may be impacted. And we would like to believe, we don't know whether this from 1 lakh to 1 crore is permanent or it is temporary. But as far as the statement of the Honorable Finance Minister is concerned, the purpose was that they never wanted, because of this impact of COVID, the companies to go into the CIRP route. So let us hope that it is temporary, but if it is permanent, my dear friends, then we have to accept that. Okay. Whether 1 crore includes interest or principal, well, everything is included, friends. If the interest part is also there, you owe interest, the corporate debtor owes interest to you, obviously you can include that. If you look at the application format, it also talks about the calculation. So you have to give the entire calculation of maybe the liquidated damages also, supposing you are entitled as per the agreement certain damages, even that is also becomes a debt. So please look at the definition of claim, debt and default, right? These are very important definitions. Section 4. Now there is another observation that Section 4 only allows the limit to increase and not to decrease. The government, it does not empower the government to decrease. Well, I would say, you see, if you go to the General Clauses Act, the power to issue an order also allows that government authority to modify it, to withdraw it, to change it. So please understand. And in any case, from 1 lakh to 1 crore, they can go. So they can oscillate between 1 lakh and 1 crore. So I would say it is not a power to increase. They have a power to decide between 1 lakh and 1 crore. So I will say that even they have a power to reduce from 1 crore to 10 lakhs. Or in fact, I must share this with you. Insolvency Law Committee, which was set up and which gave its report in March 2018, on the basis of which the second amendment took place on 6/6/2018. They also recommended to the central government that the limit of 1 lakh should be increased to 10 lakh of rupees, right, under Section 4, which the government did not agree at that point of time. And they did not amend it. They did not amend, the IBC on 6/6/2018 by increasing the limit from 1 lakh to 10 lakh. But now, because of the certain circumstances, now therefore this has been done. From 1 lakh to 1 crore, it has been done. I only work as IP and have no other COP. Can I send notice on behalf of the OC? Well, yes. Why can't you? Can definitely send us. So there should not be any this thing. Would like to understand how the revision in IBC will affect the company's winding up rules 2020, which has just become effective from 1st April 2020. My dear friends, this is again a very good question. Let me take up this. Winding up rules, even if they were not there. So winding up was continuing under the Companies Act because those provisions were notified. Now, which rules were applying? Obviously, the Company Code rules of 1959 were applied. Now, coming to companies winding up rules are only to facilitate the winding up. And in what circumstances the winding up can be done, my dear friends? We have to go back to Section 271 of the Companies Act 2013, from where which I think you are aware that a clause relating to inability to pay debts, which was 271(1)(a), which was there, that has been omitted. So therefore, a winding up of companies can only happen not because of inability of debts, but because of other reasons. And other reasons are given, like if the company passes a special resolution, if it does not file its balance sheet for last 3 years, or if it continues its business for against the interest of the country, security and sovereignty of the state, and so on and so forth. There are 4 or 5 clauses which are there. So winding up under Companies Act can happen only for those circumstances, but commercial insolvency, which was earlier inability to pay debts and which has become default under IBC, obviously winding up cannot be invoked there. So I hope I'm clear on this. When individual partnership is likely to come, my dear friends, now we are all stuck. You see, we are trying to protect the corporate debtors less than 1 crore. I think all of us know what is the limit for personal insolvency, even for partnership firms? It is 1,000 rupees. So do you want these provisions to be brought immediately? There will be a chaos in the country, my dear friend. So I think we'll have to wait. And somebody also says, are you joking? Well, yes, definitely that provision has to come sometime or one day or the other. And I think that is going to bring a lot of work to the IPs also, because IPs will start. You see, in a personal insolvency, IPs will have a very big role from the filing of the application. Because if you look at the provisions, if you have studied Fresh Start, insolvency and bankruptcy provision, it says the moment the application is filed, an IP will be appointed. He will examine the application, whether that is correct, and he will submit his report to DRT or NCLT, depending upon whether it is a personal guarantor. And then on that basis, the tribunal will decide whether to accept, admit, or reject. And then you see an IP will be appointed to continue either the Fresh Start process or the IRP process. And there is a provision of interim moratorium also, which is quite different. So individual insolvency is very interesting, my dear friends, and it has better role of IPs, than CIRP, because you will be involved from day one, from the date of filing of the application. So if it comes, actually it is going to bring a lot of work to this thing, but not in the current situation, of course. Yes, I think we have shot over the time. There are a huge number of questions which are coming up. I'll just ask Dr. Binoy whether we can continue or what is to happen. So Dr. Binoy, can you guide us on this if you are still there?
Hello, so this is Prashant. He has actually left for some urgent work.
Okay.
He just left a few minutes ago. So it's up to you whether you would like to continue.
I can continue provided you have the technical feasibility. I mean, there is no.
Yeah. We do have all that. It's up to you.
Okay.
But there
Let
was
me.
one interesting. Yeah, there was one interesting question that shouldn't the limit for OC and FC it should be kept different like it can be, because this one person has also asked this question. If you would see.
Yeah. So I think you are right. For OCs and FCs, there are different limits which could be there. Right now, there is no provision in IBC to say so. If we have to bring that provision, yes, the act needs to be amended. That is there. But frankly speaking, friends, if we keep a lower limit for OCs and higher limit for FCs, how does it going to impact? Because in any case, if the lower limit for OC is there, the company comes into CRP, even the FCs will also have to will be affected by that. So I don't think it is going to serve any purpose, right? That is there. Okay. I feel unless the code amended in Parliament, mere notification will not have legal effect. Is it correct? No, Mr. MSV, this is not correct, because there are what is known as the Parliament has passed an act. It has given a delegated power. A delegation has been given to the central government to issue notifications, which they have done so pursuant to the power given by the Parliament already to them. Right? Look at Section 2. Look at Section 1. Now, I'm also pointing out one more aspect which probably you may or may not be aware. Section 1 says that this act is applicable to whole of India except Part 3, which was not applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. I think everyone has read that because everyone is aware of this, right? Now, the central government has issued a notification. If you look at the notification has been issued for the Jammu Kashmir reorganization, the powers which are already there with the central government. Now they say that the proviso in Section 1 stands deleted because the central government has got powers. So they have amended that act also. They have done that. And if you look at Section 1, it also says that different periods, time period may be notified by the central government for notifying certain provisions. Look at Section 243, I believe. Yes, 243. It is yet to be notified. It has not been notified. So government can issue notifications also pursuant to the powers which are there under the act. So I hope I'm clear on this. Okay. Let us read. Prashant, if you have read the questions, you can ask. I think that will make my task easier. Voluntary liquidation versus striking off, which is better option for a company having more debts? Well, my dear friends, Mohit, this question has been asked at number of forums, voluntary liquidation versus striking off company. Friends, voluntary liquidation is, what is the difference? Voluntary liquidation is the death of the company. Striking off is putting the company in a coma. It is not the death of the company. The name of the company still exists. Any creditor can go for revival of the company. Supposing his due was there and you were not showing your in your affidavit or in your books of account, if he's the affected party, agreed party can go and can ask for the revival of the company for next 20 years. So if you read sections 248 to 252, all these provisions will be there, 252 particularly. So therefore, my dear friends, voluntary liquidation is that putting the company to a complete closure. Striking off is not closure. You are just having a peace of mind because the name does not exist now. I mean, you don't have to do the filings, but company can be revived anytime. So definitely, if you want to put a complete closure, so therefore voluntary liquidation is the answer there. Okay. If you go for more voluntary liquidation, it increases the work of the IPs also. Yes.
So there has been one question. It is that if filing opens on 1st May, and from 1st May, since Section 7, 9, and 10 could be suspended, how would the application be filed?
Well, my dear friends, let us not presume right now that they have suspended it. Honorable Finance Minister simply stated in her press statement that they may consider suspension. This is the statement which was there. Let me read the exact part of this. It says, if the situation continues beyond April, the government will protect companies from being forced into insolvency by suspending IBC for 6 months. Well, if the government suspends, of course, it will require an ordinance. It cannot be done by a notification. Here, notification will not work. It will require an ordinance, which the government can definitely do it. They will suspend 7, 9, and 10. And if 7, 9, 10 are suspended, then of course no filing will be able to, then it will be done in that case. Yes.
Sir, hopefully you have answer to all the queries. I think
Well,
most
I
of
have
the
not been able to answer because there are a lot of continuing questions which are coming. What we can do, Prashant, is that
Yes, sir.
if you can save this chat box, you can
Sure.
mail me all these questions. What you and I, your team and I, what we can do is we can work together and we can create answers, right, in briefly, and maybe we can put it up for the benefit of all, right?
Yes,
I
sir.
think that to all the participants, then it can be emailed, right? Those who have attended, I think they should be benefited more than anybody else.
So also we can put it on our website, so they could be accessible by everyone.
Well, that's your choice. If you want to put it on website, that's good. It's like kind of an FAQs or something. I mean, an
Yes, sir.
opinion
Exactly.
we can express. I think this is
Actually, I had one question for Ms. Medha. If at least this session we are winding down.
yeah.
Um,
If she's there,
the question was,
yeah.
the question was that she had mentioned the recovery rate at 71%. In all these 2-3 years that I am looking at the IBC, I don't see recovery except for, let's say, Binani and SR. Going beyond 50%. I mean, the average is more like 30-35 paisa to a rupee. So I don't know where the 71% is coming in the presentation. I was wondering actually.
Can you identify your name? Can you
My name
identify?
is Anish Nanavati.
Okay. Is Medha there, Prashant?
It appears she has also left.
Acha,
Okay. You can probably just make a note of this question as well.
We'll do that, sir.
You are
We'll
right.
do that.
I agree with you, Ashish, because in the sense that yes, the haircuts are much more, and they are not only 29%. They are much more. So definitely, I think we need a clarification. Prashant, you can just ask Medha to maybe she can clarify on this, right?
We'll do
Probably
that.
it's the average.
Well, I mean, you are right. I mean, if, except for one or two matters, I don't think 71% is the recovery rate at anyway. In fact, according to me, if you look at the IBBI documents also, the haircut is between 50 to 60%. So recovery rates are only 40%, 40 to 45%, which is there. So, and if you look at the numbers, 75% of the companies are going towards liquidation route. So in numbers, it is in fact the reverse one that is there. Okay, so thank you, friends, for being very patient. I hope I'm able to clarify most of your doubts, and particularly on the impact of the relaxation in the IBC threshold. It was wonderful to have all of you here. On behalf of the ICSI, I thank each one of you. And I also thank ICSI, Dr. Binay, Prashant, and other people who are as a team ICSI, particularly for inviting me. And I was so glad because I'm right now in US. I can't come to India because of no flights and the lockdown. And in fact, I had to wake up at 4 a.m. today to take this session, but it was really, really wonderful. Thank you, my dear friends. So
We are all grateful for your efforts, sir. We know the time differences, so thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I think we should continue these kind of presentations in future also. Maybe
We'll
on
do that, sir.
aspects, particularly individual insolvency. I think most of the people are wanting to know. I think we must keep up this, right? Thank you.
We'll do
friends.
that, sir.
And if it is possible, can we create some WhatsApp group so that if any questions are there, we can take help of Ashish ji.
We'll do that, sir. We'll do that.
Ashish ji, Pawan here.
Yeah. Good to hear your voice, sir. Great, sir. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Prashant, we can leave the meeting now.
Yeah, sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you.